have been a number of studies done. One of the studies was done by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who's a leader in the field. And he took 24 patients of his own, and he put them on a whole foods plant-based diet. And his goal was to get the total cholesterol less than 150, because the Framingham Heart Study had shown that if the cholesterol was less than 150, your risk of getting a heart attack went down to almost zero. But if it were above 150, between 150 and 200, the risk was 35% increased risk. So he set out to lower the cholesterol, and he took 24 of his patients, and he did it over 5 years, and then he extended it out over 12 years. And what he found was that of the 18 patients that stayed on the diet, they all had coronary artery disease, and before they started, there were 50 cumulative events, cardiovascular events. So these were serious patients. And what he found at 5 years was there were no cardiovascular events. At 12 years, there were no cardiovascular events in these 18 patients. Meanwhile, the 6 who went off the diet had a number of cardiovascular events. They went right back to the scenario they had before. And then what happened was people questioned, well, the study's too small. You can't show anything with a 24-person study. So he enlarged it. He did a study with 198 patients. And of the 198 patients, 177 stayed on the diet. Of the 177, they stayed on for almost 4 years. The study continued for 4 years. And what it showed was, of the 177, one patient had an event. Of the 177. That's a 0.6% event rate. And these were seriously ill patients. And the patients, the 21 patients that fell off, 13 out of 21 patients in that time period had events. So that's more than 50% of patients having events. So he did angiograms, and you saw with many of the patients, patients that he did, you saw the halting of cardiovascular disease, and in some you actually saw reversal of the cardiovascular disease. And I've had patients who have had the same thing. Let me give you an example. I have a male Caucasian who's 70 years old, and he has cardiovascular disease, and he's on 3 different medications for blood pressure and cholesterol. And he goes to get carotid Dopplers done, where they look at your arteries in your neck, and they're more than 50% blocked. He works with me for a year. He goes back to the cardiologist, and they can't find any atherosclerosis. And the inflammation goes down to almost zero. And what does the cardiologist say, who did the initial exam and the follow-up exam? Oh, you can't reverse cardiovascular disease. And he says, what? And he says, oh, but at the same time, your inflammation went down. That's really impressive. But you can't reverse cardiovascular disease. And there are many cardiologists who are much more open than that. And I said, you need a new cardiologist. But the same person who did the carotid Dopplers, the cardiologist, did it a year later. So it wasn't from user deficiency in terms of finding it. It was just the belief that you can't reverse cardiovascular disease. So you need to find people who believe in this. This is what shows the power of why you can do this. And this is how to inspire. By showing the journal articles, by showing how studies can do this, by showing anecdotal stories. And to take it off the topic, it doesn't have to be diabetes and heart disease. It can be other diseases. For instance, I have a patient who has Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, referred to as Crohn's disease. She's been on the lifestyle modifications for 2 months. Her inflammation, CRP, went from 6.6 to 3.3 in a month. So it cut in half. It was still high. Over 3 is high. Then in the next month, it went to less than 1. And less than 1 is ideal. 1 to 3 is average. Nobody wants to be average. Nobody wants to be average. They want to be optimal. And the idea behind this is navigating people to optimal health.